Hi, I'm sorry I had to stop telling you that story because I had to take that call. I know it was from my director, and I had to take it. So, but I'm here now, and I'd like to continue telling you my class reunion story, my 30th class reunion story. It's pretty funny actually. Um, Everything starts to happen at once in life. You go through these long moments in life where nothing seems to happen. Nothing seems to change. Everything just seems stagnant and staying the same way. And then all at once, I don't know, history, the work you've laid down starts to catch up to you. And things start happening really fast. And I guess that was what my life was like at the time, around my 30th. I hardly gave anybody I went to school with thought. And I'll admit, I kept in touch with a few friends. I had a friend named Mike. He was a really nice guy, farmer, fantastic person. I kept in touch with him. My friend George, kept in touch with him. And a friend of mine, Connie, she was a wonderful girl that I went to school with. I kept in touch with her as well. But the rest of them, people come and go in your life. And it's funny, sometimes you stay friends with people your whole life, and sometimes they move on. And it's not because they don't like you or care about you. It was just the time for them to walk out of your life. And sometimes that's easy to take, and sometimes it's not. And you have to learn to deal with it. And just take the situation for what it is. It's time to move on. And that can happen in friends and jobs, everything, every aspect of your life. You always hope that neighborhood bar, that gas station that's so convenient for you to get gas at, and have your paper right there. And you always think that the grocery store, where you grew up as a kid, is always going to have the same donuts, right, when you were a kid. But one day you walk in there and you buy one, and it looks exactly the same. And you find out that it's totally different. The baker retired, they changed the recipe, they changed the supplier for the flour that they got. But something's different. And, that little tiny thing in your life that you always thought was going to be there, that really important thing, it just kind of goes away. And you hope maybe you can recapture that. And I think that's the lure of time travel. Yeah. That's the lure. That's the overarching theme behind time travel. To go back and get things right. To steal that taste of your life one more time. Now, as much as I do work in time travel, I really have no desire to go back in my own past. Because though I have a lot of great memories, there's also some very traumatic things in my past that I want to leave them be. So, that said, look at this. Isn't this the coolest thing? It's a big old, I think they call it a fiber optic light. And it's really colorful. So, but I was told some people like it when you just brush it along the camera. It's kind of nice. I digress. It's easy to get distracted, isn't it? When you're telling a story to a friend. You like that? It kind of tickles, doesn't it? Yeah. So anyway, it's pretty fun. We'll do some more of that later. I got this call from Doug, and Doug comes out of nowhere, wants me to come back home to our small hometown outside Chicago and check out this radio that he finally got working after 30 years. This is an early Motorola car radio. And he is convincing me that he not only has it working, but it's transmitting radio broadcasts, signals from 1933. Well, of course, I don't believe him. No, this is just, he's read about my research. He's read about my biography. This is a joke. Somebody in my family who knows a little bit about my work has told him things, and he's extrapolated from there. He thinks I'm interested because I'm a scientist for the United States government. Well, that might be, but I still have to follow up because it was a strange paranormal event in my own life. So you never know what you're going to find. If nothing else, I can at least get Doug some help if he's a mental patient. Okay? So I'm going to follow through. I no sooner pack my briefcase, some scientific tools, get my gear together, and check my messages right before I walk out the door. And sure as hell, what is waiting for me? You're right. My invitation to my 30th class reunion. It came delayed in the mail, which was weird. And it just so happens it was the same weekend that Doug expected me to show up to hear his 1933 radio broadcasts. Okay. I know the jig is up, as they say. I'm being set up by my old friends. They want me to show up for a class reunion. They know I'm some kind of scientist working on the study of time, travel, and all kinds of weird things, whatever the government tells them, to cover up the actual real things I do with aliens. And my friends think, all right, let's fool him. He'll come back for this. All right, good joke. So I look at the invitation, and no time to RSVP, so I'm just going to have to show up and jump in my car, have my driver take me down to the airport, and I take a small shuttle flight back towards my hometown. And there I am. Sure as hell, it's been 25 years since the last time I visited my old hometown, and it hasn't changed much. Do you need another one? Okay. The airport looks almost identical. It still has a dirt grass runway. And I can't help but laugh. Last time I flew out of here, the same people were working behind the counter. They don't look a day older. That's the way it is sometimes. And my ride's waiting for me. There's my old friend Doug. Shows up in a pickup truck. A little worse for road wear. Not looking so good. A little peaked, if you ask me. And his truck does not look even road worthy. But I say, okay, that's cool. I'll ride with him. And I'll be good about it. No big deal. I don't put on airs for anybody. We shake hands and put my bags in the back of the truck. Start down the road. Doug is not saying much. Not making eye contact. Just kind of focusing on the road. But he was always kind of like that. So I start the conversation off. What's going on, Doug? Is this for real, or is this some kind of prank to get me back for the 30th? And he assures me that it is real. He got the old Motorola radio out of my friend Dean's car. It's working, and sure as hell, it is playing broadcasts from that weekend in 1933 when Dean and John and everyone disappeared from all our lives. Okay. Take me there and let's figure it out. So, we head down to his house, and he parks outside of his garage and pulls the door up. I thought I was looking at a Buck Rogers painting in full color. Dr. Frankenstein would have fit in well in this lab. Doug has every doohickey, whirlybird, experiment situation you can imagine inside this small one-car garage. Every space in this garage is completely used for the purposes of discovery. I'm looking at something that I can't even recognize. Some of this stuff is over my head. Doohickeys and whirlybirds and every kind of bottle, tube, and beaker you could imagine bubbling along. I've seen some mad scientist lairs in my day. This one put all of them to shame. But straight in front of me, in front of my eyes, right there, in the center of the back wall, is a lit 1933 authentic Motorola car radio hooked up to two gigantic Bell speakers. Car batteries, one after the other, hooked in tandem to supply energy to the radio, and a faint static of a AM radio not tuned to a specific frequency cascading across my ears. It's pretty good. I say immediately, okay, without setting anything up here, why don't you show me what you have with the radio and your notes, and we'll take it from there. So, of course, Doug hands me a clipboard with some very extensive notes on it, and I begin flipping through, casually at first, checking some of the math, checking some of his calculations. Not everything seems to be adding up right, but the engineering sounds correct. So I go deeper into it as he begins to tune the radio. And sure as hell, I begin to hear Bing Crosby and Bob Hope talking across the airwaves. I remember this routine. Now, this could be a setup. I've been fooled before, so I don't take it too seriously. I tell Doug, oh, I can hear the 1 o'clock train coming through. You can always set your watch by the trains in this town, right? Of course, he agrees with me. Your engineering looks pretty sound here, Doug, but I'm not so sure that you've got the power levels right. It says here you had to step up the electricity going to the radio. Wouldn't that have burned it out? He begins to tell me how he had to replace many of the diodes and vacuum tubes in the radio to get it working properly. This is the time before transistors, and he had to painstakingly repair and remake the vacuum tubes because he couldn't find replacements. I'm amazed at his notes. Somebody taking the time to look up the schematics and blueprints for such diverse and obsolete vacuum tubes, not only to match up repair parts, but to repair them and fix them. And he had a vacuum chamber for his tubes right beside the radio. I think he's telling me the truth. I delved deeper and deeper into his notes, And things start to get a little more erratic as he is making contact through the radio. Contact. Doug, what do you mean by contact? And Doug tells me the radio answers my questions. Okay. I quickly look deeper into his handwritten notes and see the scribbles of a man who has completely lost all sense and balance with reality. I could be dealing with an insane person, and he might be very dangerous. So I quietly set the notes down and go, well, of course, Doug, that would be a first. A radio answering questions, and from the past no less. If you don't mind me asking, is there a way for me to verify this for myself? As he was tuning the radio, he finally hit upon the proper frequency he was searching for. And he says, there it is. Radio, can you hear me? And the radio replies, yes. Okay, I have seen a lot of science fiction come to life in my labs. This is ridiculous. I begin to immediately look for the wizard behind the curtain. It's obvious that a charlatan's trick is being pulled on me. A magician's blind has been set up somewhere nearby. I also look for an antenna, a wire, something leading to another source for the radio. It's obvious he's built a two-way receiver out of this radio, and somebody is on the other end, pranking my poor friend, Doug. Well, I say to Doug, do you mind if I ask the radio a question? It's obvious that there's something going on here. And the radio says back, Andrew Michaels, is that you? I was shocked. Dean, is that you, Dean? Okay, this has gone far enough, Doug. This has to stop. It's one thing to fool me, but it's another thing to fool me with my dead friend Dean's voice. Now, whoever that is, it's got to stop. Andrew, it's me, Dean. This isn't a joke. Listen to Doug, is what I heard next. My eyes met Doug's, and we literally bored burning holes through each other's eye sockets. I was angry, and he was livid. Why didn't you ever call me? Doug said. Why didn't you ever follow up with me? Why did you guys all leave me behind? Why did you leave Dean and John behind? I was shocked by this, and I knew exactly what Doug was talking about. I left for the Navy not long after the incident, and I never looked back. I only visited a few times for funerals, weddings, and I was always gone the next weekend. After my parents died, I never came back. There was no reason to anymore. My siblings didn't even live here anymore. And I owed Doug a small apology. Because he's right. I never did follow up and let him know why we didn't come pick him up. Yes, it was true. We got stuck in the mud. But there was something more nefarious than that. Our friend Tom was making us dodge Doug after graduation, and I could never get a straight answer from him on it. And that's exactly what I told Doug. I told him the truth. There were two of us in the car who wanted to come get you. Tom wouldn't stop. It was Tom's car. I was just driving it for him. You know how he was about driving. I never understood why he wanted a car so bad but didn't want to drive it. It was a miracle if you could get him behind the driver's seat. He never could handle a stick shift right. Doug smirked. It's because Tom didn't want to go down there. Tom wanted to get stuck in that mud. Well, I chose where we turned around. No, you didn't, Doug replied. He picked the fight until he knew you would turn around at that spot, and he knew you'd get stuck. He knew because he had lived through it before. Tom had been there before. Okay, Doug. All right, why don't you start at the beginning and tell me what's going on? And Doug begins to tell me that what had happened in that town next to us, with the crazy little green men from Mars landing and crashing, and the gas main cover-up blowing up and killing 150 people, that moment in time had happened before. And when he said that, on the other side of the radio I heard, he's telling the truth, Andrew. He's telling the truth. It's happened before. What in the hell is going on here? Doug, just tell me what's going on. Doug proceeds to tell me that Tom was a victim in the past. He did go with Dean because we refused to turn back. And we went to get Doug. They all got captured in the attack of the landed alien craft and were taken away. We fixed the radio after a time, contacted Dean and Tom and John on the other side. But things turned out different. We could only rescue one person, and I rescued Tom and put him back in the past. Tom was supposed to tell Dean and John not to go with the aliens, not to go forward to that town and visit, and they would have survived. But when we left Tom in the past, he lied to me and everyone else concerned. He only wanted to prevent himself from going back to that town and being captured. When he did that, the timeline reset. The moment he got in that car, the timeline reset. And sure as hell, as I drove down the road, I lost my patience right on cue, and I turned around and got stuck. Stuck in that road, just like I did before. And Doug looked at me and said, because I was with you then. I was in the car with you then. I thought I knew Tom was going to do what he was going to do, his nefarious plan to save his own self at the cost of everyone else's lives. But I'd hoped you would convince everybody to come back with me. Now, through a time dilation, our friends Dean and John and those other 150 people are trapped somewhere on a world far away. This time we have to bring back somebody, because you can only bring one through with your time travel device. Dean's promised when you take him back to the past, he won't do what Tom did. He won't do what I do and stay away. And that's when it all came together for me. Tom didn't want Doug around. He didn't want Doug talking to us. He didn't want Doug tipping his hand and stopping it. Because Tom knew if the aliens didn't get the right amount of people, they would come looking for us, looking for anybody close by. And Tom was afraid of getting grabbed again. Because as time played out. He had to be in that spot. His house, closer than any of us to that town. He and his family would be captured. And he couldn't risk that. He thought if we get the right amount of people to go, everything will be all right. And he knew, Doug knew, so he had to keep Doug away from us. And his plan worked. Doug turned to me and said, I didn't build any of this. And I said, who did build this? Doug, if you didn't do it. And Doug said, we built it. You stayed here for 30 years. You were my best friend, and I was your man Friday. And we built this lab, and we rescued Tom. But in the new timeline, you didn't have to build it. You didn't have to build a quantum bubble to protect this lab against time changes. You went off and became a scientist because you thought everything was okay now. We were wrong. I looked at Doug and said, well, we not only have to do this to rescue Dean, we have to rescue John, so we'd have to go through this again twice. You're going to have to relive the last 30 years again inside this time dilation. This quantum time bubble around this garage that I built. How did I do it without alien intervention? And Doug looked at me and said, well, you had it given to you through necessity. Through that same necessity 30 years ago, you built it on your own. You were always meant to be a time traveler. So of course I must ask the question, where's Tom? And Doug told me, because of what happened, the guilt was too much and Tom tried to kill himself all those years ago. Spent most of his life in and out of psychiatric wards. We've got to go get him. We've got to go and retrieve one of the men and take them back to the beginning and hope Dean sets everything right. Okay. And then the doctor, Andrew Michaels, spoke. He turned to Doug and said, Doug, Dean, can you hear me? And Dean said, yes, Michael. Andrew Michaels, I can hear you. Dean, I don't know how you're contacting me on the other end. And I don't know how any of this happened, but we can't leave any of the people behind. If we're going to do this, we have to stop it at the source. The first time we didn't do it correctly. But this time I know. I've got the means. I can bring everyone back. And that's when I showed him the contents of my briefcase and the contents of my own signature quantum time bubble. Doug, we can bring them all back. And I can stop whatever these aliens are doing and why they're doing it. That's when Dean spoke up and said that it was peaceful. They didn't see us as sentient beings. They saw us as cattle. They didn't understand what they were doing. But once they time traveled and warped through space, it was impossible for them to come back. And that's why it took 30 years to figure out a way to open up a corridor between their world and ours. They sent a ship to retrieve subjects. A group of people so similar to us, but with a different means of space travel. Instead of going to the stars, they sent emissaries, robotic spaceships, to retrieve specimens to retrieve subjects and bring them back to their world. Rarely did it ever go wrong, but in this case, it brought back a good sample of Earth's biology. And part of that was a group of sentient beings that knew they were being taken against their will. They tried everything on their end to reverse the process, but it would be a death sentence to send them back. The only answer was for the corridor to be opened on our end. We've done it once, we can do it again. Doug looked at me with great relief in his eyes as he realized I could warp space through my quantum time bubbles to that world using the technology of the garage and mine combined. A bubble within a bubble, and hold time at bay, bring everybody back and put them all in the past. The emissary ship would simply crash, pick up people that were put there by the government, not people, creatures, objects, whatever they gathered. Now that we know what their purpose is, gather up the sample and they would leave. And none would be the wiser. The broken gas main story would work. The town would be restored to its normal path, and all my friends would grow up in their normal path. Everything would be protected. And our friend Tom, whose moment of cowardice led to a lifelong history of illness, could have a shot at redemption in his own life. Everything looked good. Dean and the others, communicating on the other side, realized the plan, and a roar was heard by the crowd. They wouldn't have to keep living in this cycle, this perpetual cycle. They would all be coming home at once. We set the plan in motion, worked out the configurations, and just as we were about to signal the start of the retrieval process, a small click was heard behind me. The click of a gun chambering. Doug and I turn around to see our friend Tom standing at the garage door, a look of enraged hatred on his face. "So you think you've got it all figured out," Tom said. "But you don't. There's always a twist. There's always a climax to all of these stories," Tom said. He didn't look himself at all, even through the last 30 years, even through all the injuries he had given his body. He looked horrible, emaciated. He looked like death warmed over. And he was getting the most evil look in his eyes turning pitch black. I came through on the first time. I came through with him. Our hands in the air, at his direction. Doug looked at me and I looked at him and I said, "What the hell is he talking about?" And Doug said, "You don't know? He's a traveler too. He's one of them." And then the penny dropped on me. "Exactly who am I talking to inside Tom?" I asked, my hands still raised for my own safety. And Tom looked at me with the blankest eyes, blackest eyes I've ever seen, and said, "Ah, my world, lazy and cowardice, afraid to experience what biology offers us, the experience of growing old and dying, all taken away from my people through our evolution, our ideas, our science. I long to live a life, a normal life. I'm not going back. Nothing you do is going to make me go back." I looked at Tom and I said, "Look, whoever you are, can we work out a deal?" "No, you'll want to send me back. I'm not going back. We looked at each other. Quizzingly, I knew not what to do, but Doug did. He stepped forward. The gun was raised up towards his chest. "Stop or I'll shoot," the alien inside Tom said. I said, "Doug, don't do it. Back off. It's okay. We'll figure something out. We can make a deal." Doug turned to me and said, "Next time, don't forget me, buddy." He turned to Tom and charged the gun. Before I could act, the gun went off. The single-barreled .410 shotgun at close range tore a hole directly under his chest cavity. My whole face and body spattered with the blood of my friend. A small rifle, or shotgun, I charged too, as he pulled the gun open and tried to discharge the shell and rechamber it. I slammed directly into him, much, much bigger than he was, and we both crashed to the ground. Shell casing going one way, gun the other. I climbed, literally climbed up his body from his waist to his chest as he scratched and tore at me, tore at my flesh. My hands just went naturally around his neck. I could feel how thin he was. I could feel the blood pumping from his chest through his neck, pounding my own ears. My blood was boiling. I'd never felt rage like this. You could hear Doug grasping for air, the air leaving his body. He was choking to death on his own blood, and his blood was crushing his lung collapsing against the outward pressure of the blood filling his chest cavity. He only had moments to live. I almost snapped Tom's neck, and I realized what I was doing in time, and I pulled my hands back. And I picked him off the ground, and I slammed him to the ground. When I did, he tried to brace for the impact, and I jerked him up quickly and slammed him again. This time, he didn't react fast enough, and I knocked him unconscious against the hard ground of the driveway. With him unconscious, I turned quickly to Doug and pulled a sharp pen from my from my pocket protector. I knew what had to be done. I tried to relieve the pressure on Doug's lung as he was gasping for air, and I poked a hole through the side of his lung cavity, right between his ribs, and allowed the pressure off his lung so he could get some oxygen. He looked at me, coughed once, a little bit of blood from his lips. He said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, buddy. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna die here. I'm gonna die." And he grabbed my hand. He grabbed my hand. He held my hand. "You don't remember," he said. "You don't remember working with me. You don't remember building things. It was the happiest time of my life. I remember because I stayed in here when you went there. When the time machine reset, I retained all my thoughts. I retained," and he started coughing. He said, "You know what the good part is?" And choking back the tears, I said, "What?" He said, "If you hurry and you send me forward, it'll be okay. Because I'll just do it all over again." He was right. I quickly grabbed him, his arms, even though I'm a lot larger and stronger than him. Moving an injured, let alone dying, 180-pound adult male is like moving many, many bags of potatoes by yourself. I literally dragged him, falling backwards, cutting my elbow and knees, dragging him with all my strength causing him immense pain, I drug him to the center of the machine, the pad, to send him forward to the world and retrieve everyone. I placed a quantum time bubble on his chest and said, when you get there, I'll walk them through the procedure to come back through the time bubble. I opened up the portal to the other world, stepped off the platform, and watched my friend Doug disappear. They grabbed him and forgot everything about me for the longest time. It was more important on that planet, those 150 souls, to save his life than to escape and find freedom. The humanity that I saw that day was immense. They put off their own rescue. I heard it all through the radio to save our friend, their friend, someone that they had communicated to through a strange, otherworldly Motorola radio for 30 years. Their only connection to this world, this planet of billions of people. Their best friend. They didn't forget him. And I listened while they saved his life. I turned my attention quickly during this whole process and checked on Tom. He was gone. In the struggle, I turned my back too long, and he had escaped. He didn't try to kill me, his gun broken. Doug on the other side. He realized it was too late, so he ran. He ran for part 2, the backup plan. The plan that I don't know about. That's where you come in. I don't know what Tom's plan was, and I won't know, because he escaped. As I was pulling everyone through, I stepped out of the quantum time field to allow the 150 to return, and they lost all memory of what had occurred. Only I, inside the garage, like Tom and Doug before, had known what was to be. The world reset. I sent messages to the proper authorities. When the ship crashed, the aliens gathered up the biological evidence left on truck beds for them to find. And they departed our planet peacefully in 1933. I had no idea what happened to Tom. His family took him up as a runaway, a casualty of the Great Depression, and I left it at that. I remember the day I walked into Doug's garage and showed him what we had done. His mom thought we were science fiction fans of the Frankenstein movie, and it was just a bunch of kids playing. She never really questioned everything, but you never know what Doug and her talked about in the privacy of their own moments. I always knew I had a backup plan. I always knew I had another way out if something went wrong. I could always put a bubble inside a bubble. A time dilation within a time dilation. No one would know they were even in there. Why, I could even create a whole universe of my own inside one of those. Think about that. I was driving along. It was 1939, Halloween. I was in New Jersey, Bayonne, New Jersey. We had just gotten to port a day before, and I found a car that I could take back to Chicago. I wanted to see my mom so bad. Her health was failing, and I just wanted to see her one more time. I had buried my father 2 years before, and part of me was glad that their suffering was going to be over, because I saw the war looming, and I didn't want them to live through it again. They buried enough relatives in the Great War. But I digress. I flipped the radio over and found the Mercury Theater playing. The Mercury Theater. Oh, what a grand troupe of actors and actresses. They were doing H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. And a strange spaceship landed in a farm in New Jersey. And as I listened to the recording, it suddenly dawned on me, oh, Tom, you son of a bitch. I stopped the car, totally locked up the brakes, got out, and looked towards the sky. I never put it together. I know where Tom is now. And I'm going to pay him a visit. Time travelers. They're such a little son of a bitch. And that's the story. That's the story of how I met H.G. Wells. Yeah. He was a really great guy. From a certain point of view. But he sure knew a lot about our future, didn't he? Yeah. He was a real jerk, though, at school, I can tell you that. And we never got along after that. No, not at all. The reunion? No. I never went to my 30th class reunion. Thanks for asking. All right. You have a good day, too. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.